Welcome to part 2 of topic 5, which involves patrol. And so today we're going to talk about what the police do during patrol most of the time, or what patrol involves most of the time, right? What we learned from the previous topic is that only about 30% or maybe 33% around there of police activity involves actually fighting crime, which if we were to trust the media for portraying what police actually do, the media would make it seem a lot more because that's what's exciting. Nonetheless, we're going to discover a little bit what peacekeeping and order maintenance means. All right. So this person right here is Dr. Steve Mastrowski. He is a criminal justice professor from George Mason University. Yes! Where I got my PhD! Is that he said that even though police deal with order maintenance more than crime fighting, that by dealing with order maintenance, by dealing with non-criminal calls, you can actually fight crime more effectively. And so he said you can do this in 4 ways. One, he refers to as the crime prophylactic model. What that means is that when you deal with a non-criminal situation, it can prevent it from becoming a real problem. For instance, finding the person who's a little drunk in public, telling them to go home, will stop that maybe from turning into somebody getting into a bar fight and committing assault. Right? So dealing with these order maintenance issues can prevent them from escalating into something bigger. Also, when you deal with non-crime calls a lot, you get a broader exposure to the community, meaning you get to know people. You understand, like when you talk to someone, they're like, yeah, they over there by the Circle K, that's where people are doing a lot of K2. And the next time I know, okay, so that's where the community thinks the K2 is coming from. So maybe I can do some patrolling over there, or shake some bushes over there to see if that is actually the case. And then maybe I do stumble upon some K2 at the Circle K. Also, when the police have coercive powers, meaning that they can arrest you, they can throw down with you. So so it's very similar to that prophylactic model. But when someone sees you, you're the police, you can throw down with them, they might decide, okay, I'm not going to get so crazy. I'm not going to get so violent right now. And lastly, and this is very important, is that if you deal with order maintenance effectively and you show up for the little things, people will trust you with the big things. The police must establish credibility with the community. If the community doesn't believe that the police should be the police, or if they don't believe that the police is credible or legitimate, things break down. That's what happens in a lot of developing nations. It happened in South Africa, where I'm from. So by dealing with the little things, they'll trust you with the big ones. So what are some of the reasons why people would call the police for non-crime reasons? Like, think about most of the time when you've called the police. Has it been for a typical crime? Some people have called the police because their neighbors are being too loud, right? Partying too hard. I remember in college, we would often get the police called on us for having really loud parties. It's not my fault that I was super popular in college. Actually, I wasn't, but all my friends were, and so by extension I was. I was also in a band in college, which, if you're decently okay, really ups your coolness factor. I played bass in one band, I played electric guitar in another, and acoustic guitar in another. But most of the time when people do call the cops, it's not because there's a crazy crime going on. Oftentimes when people call the cops, they want to maintain a certain social boundary. So let's think of a good example, but where the actual person calling the cops was wrong. What about all the racist Karens that we've seen on YouTube, right? The woman calling the cops on the bird watcher while strangling her own dog, or the woman not wanting black people to enjoy a fun barbecue, right? Remember all those racist Karens? Yes. What they wanted to do was maintain a social boundary. Now, the boundary they wanted to maintain was they didn't want to be close to black people, which is wrong. But let's think of a legitimate example. I remember living in my old neighborhood in Evansville, Indiana. It was, now for those of you who don't know about Evansville, there are 2 or 3 particular drugs that are really big in Evansville, and that is methamphetamine, K2. For some reason, people in Evansville like K2. And then also the opioid crisis is starting to have a grip on the community there. Nonetheless, one day I was sitting in my house, and knock knock. I open up the door, and there's a guy who is clearly on methamphetamine. You can just see it. It's there. Someone who's high on methamphetamine looks like they're uncomfortable in their own skin, right? And think about that for a second. What methamphetamine does is a stimulant, so it like stimulates your central nervous system, right? While it also pumps all the serotonin into your brain, making you super confident, super happy, super excited. It also stimulates your central nervous system, so you are constantly twitching and doing something. So it just looks like you are uncomfortable in your own skin. And they had some long story as to why I needed to give them $25. I didn't buy it. Now, I immediately went to go on to my Facebook page for our community. Our little neighborhood had our own Facebook page, and already 3 people had posted. I called the cops on these people, and they showed the picture that their Ring app, whatever, took of the people knocking on their door. The thing is that those people all methed out did not look normal in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood has little kids, riding their little tricycles down the road, and moms, dads, and kids with dogs walking their dogs down the street. But having a twitchy meth addict, right, without a shirt on, asking for $25 was not what we normally found in our neighborhood. Now, you might say that's classist or whatever, but it just didn't seem in place. We don't normally interact with people who are from that social reality. Now, whether that is classist or not, that's a different argument. But what happened there was people in my neighborhood said, this doesn't make sense here. So we want to maintain that social distance. So they called the cops, and guess what? Cops came, busted him. The guy had a warrant, open warrant already. So go figure. Other times, people need the cops to relieve an unpleasant situation. Another reason why people sometimes call the police, and this is kind of a weird one, but it's that we call it counterpunching. It's sort of to avert the police's focus from your own behavior. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Some of you might have seen this, but you ever watched the show Cops or Live PD or whatever, and you notice someone calling the cops and then they end up getting arrested or getting a ticket? It's when it typically happens in situations where there was alcohol involved, or like 2 people were fighting, a lot of domestic abuse type of situations, or some sort of domestic situation where both partners were hitting each other or being abusive to one another. One partner calls, and it turns out that the one who did the most damage, or at least according to how the police see it, was the one who ends up getting arrested, or was the one who called the cops. So that is counterpunching. And then another reason that doesn't really involve straight up crime fighting, why people call the police that you would consider more order maintenance or peacekeeping, would be when you have certain emergency situations, like a missing child, like a missing child in itself is not a crime, but it's an emergency and someone ought to do something about it. And the entity that does that is the police. Or when you see someone wanting to jump off a bridge, right? The police come and they deal with that. Or especially a car accident. The type of order maintenance that police do the most is traffic enforcement. Although officers do not like doing traffic enforcement because it's too routine, many officers are officers because they like the random nature of police work. So when you routinize it too much, it gets boring for them. It does cause some friction, but it's low compared to other things. Again, 80% of people who are pulled over think it's legitimate. Right? Mostly white people are pulled over, and most of the time when people are pulled over, it's for speeding. Another type of order maintenance that the police deal with is domestic disturbances. That's usually when people who live together are in some sort of conflict. Involves two or more people, obviously. Oftentimes it's in an intimate relationship, or they're just living together like roommates. Only about 30% of those types of domestic disturbances are violent. So that's when wife beats her husband, husband beats his wife, someone beats their kid, kid beats mom. But women do get the short end of the stick on it. About 22% of violence against women is domestic violence. That's a lot. I mean, that's almost a quarter of violence against women is domestic violence. Women being hit by their spouses. The problem is that we don't really know if that number is too accurate. Some victim surveys will show it's different. People in the middle class are probably more likely to be dependent on their spouses. I mean, think if you're a woman and you're a middle class mom, and you don't have a job, and your husband, who's the one working, comes home and beats you. You have kids. Are you gonna call the cops? Are you gonna ruin that for your kids? Right? You're in a very bad situation. And if dad has the money, then dad can get the nice lawyer during the divorce. So that's why in the middle class, these people are much less likely to call. Other times, people are just like, well, we're too high profile of people. Oh, my husband's a professor. It can't come out that he's hitting me. And by the way, I mean, I kind of brought it upon myself. Right? Many victims of domestic violence feel that way, and it's especially the higher up in the class system you go. It is sad, and it shouldn't be that way. Depending on the jurisdiction, when police do respond to domestic disturbances, what they can do is they can either arrest somebody, they can try to mediate, they can just separate people. They can call some sort of social services like Department of Child Services, something like that. Or they can just be like, take no action. The things that that influences what decisions the officers make will be if the officer actually sees this as a private matter. Like their view of domestic violence, they might think it as a private matter, and you might get that in some of the older officers. Oftentimes, and I've seen this many times in my research, that the victim just does not want to pursue charges. Like I remember one time, I was doing a ride along in a different jurisdiction than here, and we had gone to it was like one of those paycheck places. It's like one of those places where you borrow money because you're kind of strapped for cash, and then when you get the money, they take your paycheck, one of those types of situations. And I guess there's a husband and his wife had showed up there, and they couldn't get the loan. And so the argument broke out between the husband and the wife, and then the husband just, bam, smacked his wife right in the face in the middle of everyone, while her to the point where her nose started bleeding. And then he ran off. And then the wife was just left there. The cops were called by the actual check and go people. I think that's what it was called. And then when we got there, the woman's like, yeah, he does this every now and then. It's just he got this job, and if he were to go to jail, he would lose this job. I'm not going to press charges. And at that point, the police, their hands are tied. Oftentimes, the victims just wanted the officers to not make an arrest. Can you just talk to him? Can you just tell him? Can you just do this? Right? They don't want the arrest. Also, when you arrest somebody, especially for something like domestic violence, you got to do a lot of work. You got to write reports. You got to take them to jail. You got to download your body camera footage if you have a body camera. You got to do all this crap. So can you just tell someone, hey guys, cool it? Or do you have to really arrest someone? Do you have to get a Department of Child Services involved in this? How much trouble is this really going to create? But when you do make a arrest, some research has shown that, especially I think it was the Minneapolis study, showed that when you do arrest someone for domestic violence, they're less likely to commit it again. So it has some sort of a deterrent effect, which increased that certainty of punishment. But they failed to duplicate these or replicate these findings in other cities. So we don't know if this is really going to work or not. But because mentally ill people don't necessarily understand all the norms of society, they don't understand social boundaries, they don't necessarily even understand the law completely, they're obviously going to get arrested. They're obviously much more likely to encounter the police than someone who does not have a serious mental illness, right? You get the people who have manic episodes, who have bipolar, right? They do stuff that can get kind of out of hand. People with anger issues. People who are that have schizophrenia are having, and they seem unpredictable to the average person. So the people call the police. Hey, this person is saying some really weird stuff. I'm kind of concerned. I don't know how this situation is going to play out. And so the police have a lot of discretion on how to deal with that. Most of the time they do something that's informal, right? They find a family member to help out, or they find some sort of solution that does not involve arresting the poor person. The police don't want to arrest the mentally ill people because they know. The police have hearts. They're like, oh, I've encountered this person before. In fact, you'll know a police officer that's been on the road for like 2 to 3 years, they will know most of the people who have serious mental illness problems. This is when there are not many mental health options available to people who are poor, but there are mental health options available in jail. So the police decide, I'm going to arrest this person because I know they'll get the help they need in jail. Every now and then they'll hospitalize mentally ill people, but those are very difficult because there are not a lot of mental institutions anymore because of what happened in the up to the 1960s, where people with mental illness were abused in those institutions, and then we decided to completely deinstitutionalize them. And then people with mental illness just ended up in jail more. But most of the time, the police, when they deal with someone with mental illness, don't want to give them a record. They try to find some informal way to get them out of the public eye, to help just fix the problem without sending someone to jail who really doesn't deserve to be there. Dealing with juveniles can be somewhat difficult for police. Police have a high contact with juveniles. If you look at the age crime curve, people start committing crime once your hormones start kicking in. right? Your perception of the world starts to change. Things seem unfair. You start getting angry, right? And you start committing crime at that younger age. And the police have a very high contact with juveniles. We also know that younger people don't like the police as much as older people do. And think about it. Think about that yourself. When you were younger, when I was in college or before that even, I didn't like the police because I was doing a lot of stuff that the police did not like. I was throwing eggs at people's houses, TPing houses, knocking over mailboxes, shooting paintballs at cars. The problem, though, is that the police, they know the criminal justice system. The patrol officers, they are the gatekeepers. So they exercise a lot of discretion with the juveniles. They know that if some 16-year-old kid did something that they didn't have a full understanding of what they had done, if they arrested them, that can impact their life for a long time. Yeah, their record might get expunged when they're 18, but they still were arrested. The social implications, the psychological and emotional implications of being arrested, as opposed to just being talked to and scared the shit out of, are way different. You can really impact the trajectory of someone's life with an arrest, whether it's for good or bad. So the police can decide to take no action. Like one time, my friends and I, we were 16 years old, and there was this guy who was an ass we didn't like. He was kind of mean to one of my friends. He had threatened one of my friends. And so we decided, you know what, we're gonna egg this guy's house. So we went and we egged the living daylights out of this guy's house. I think we even went and bought a bunch of bean burritos from Taco Bell and threw those at this guy's house. Actually, no, at this guy's parents' house, which is messed up. But we did it, okay? We were like 15, 16, whatever. Cops found us. Right? I remember this. It was a sergeant. He was a big, tall, just imposing police sergeant working at the Fairfax County Police Department. I remember he stopped us. We were walking still in that same neighborhood. And he stopped us and he got out of his car and he's like, stand up against my car. And he would just get in our faces and he was like, why did you do this? Rah! Right? And he scared the living. I mean, I remember I was white, and we're all white in the face, just shaking. Oh my gosh, what's this guy gonna do? And then he let us go. He made sure, he was like, where do you guys live? And we're like, well, we're all spending the night at my buddy's house here. And so as we walked to my friend's house to go to his house, he literally just like followed us in his car to make sure that we got in. And then he left. He took no action. He didn't tell our parents. He didn't arrest us. He just made sure that we went home. It was late at night. We snuck out to go egg this guy's house and throw bean burritos at it. I ate a couple of the bean burritos. I mean, come on. You can't get a bunch of bean burritos from Taco Bell and not eat some. Fire sauce. What also happens a lot is the police will arrest you, or they'll grab you, they'll put you in cuffs, and they'll take you home. They'll release you to your parents. Ma'am, we found a little bit of weed on your son. You might want to talk to him. We took this weed, we threw it away. You know, he told us this is where he got it. You might just want to keep an eye on him. We're not going to arrest him or do anything crazy. Sometimes you will arrest someone, parent doesn't want them. Oh, we kicked them out of the house. They are doing this. Then you release them to a different agency like the Department of Child Services. And then very, very few times the police will actually take them to juvie. They'll get arrested and taken to juvenile court and booked into juvie. The police no one really likes to put children in juvenile detention. These are the absolute worst cases. Because being incarcerated as a child will have serious impacts on the rest of your life.